So, you're a communist, anarchist, socialist, but your friend is a class traitor, although they are clearly open-minded towards the better way of being a human. Well, that's really nice. Welcome to this video. Here at How to Activism, I give you advice on this kind of shit. So today, we will look at how to convince people that capitalism fucking sucks and that anarchy is order in one-to-one settings. If you're not interested in those settings specifically, please watch this video anyway, as it helps me with the algorithm. And stay tuned for the next videos where I will explore convincing people in other settings. You can do that by clicking the lovely fucking subscribe button that's on your screen somewhere, unless you are watching YouTube the correct way in full screen. Okay, now that's out of the way, let's begin. Part 1. How to convince. In 1984, Robert B. Cialdini published a famous book called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, which covers exactly the topic that the title suggests it should cover. There he presents a series of principles that we can employ if we want to increase the likelihood of persuading someone else or making them do something for us. The principles the book presents, which we will get into really soon, are already used extensively by political parties and in advertising, but we revolutionaries often neglect them. It may seem like manipulation tactics at first, but I don't think it is. At worst, they are tricks that we can use to force people to take our arguments seriously. First, I want you to think about something. What was it like for you when you became a revolutionary? Keep this in mind through the rest of the video. People don't become convinced on ideological topics just because someone was better at arguing than them. When we argue with people, the goal is not to outsmart them, it is to plant a seed in their minds. Yours might have been that gender is a social construct, which challenged some of your core beliefs, or it might have been that workers are exploited by the capitalists, which caused a chain reaction resulting in you becoming fucking crazy. Becoming a revolutionary does not happen overnight. It is a process where people fight for themselves for a long time. These kinds of ideas can affect life decisions after all. Now, let's get back into the book. Principle number 1. Commitment and consistency. When we try to convince people of something, it is important to keep in mind people's strong wish to remain consistent and to commit to the decisions they've made. This has two consequences for us at the same time. At one hand, when we decide what topics to attack first, it is better to start with something that both seems a little trivial and, if they do change their minds, won't force them to change their behavior immediately. It is better to change those opinions further down the line. Or in other words, if someone is making so-called edgy jokes that aren't even funny, it is better to make them understand the joke's target situation before we tell them to change their behavior. Otherwise they go in, full defense mode and you don't get anywhere. The other side of this coin is more useful to us. If you can either convince someone on a smaller issue that at first might not seem that important to them, but when they think about it more at home, they notice that this issue contradicts others, more important opinions that they have, they will have to actually think about the issue for real. Dismissing anti-capitalism as crazy doesn't work in a situation like that. Let us take an example. If I were to convince a social democrat that it would be a good idea to engage in destructive direct actions in order to make it unprofitable to do certain things that's bad for the climate, they actually have to buy quite a few implicitly anti-capitalist arguments. They have to recognize that 1. The government isn't doing enough to stop climate change, and that it is a better strategy to take the fight in our own hands than to expect the state to do the work for us, and 2. That our production process is doing harm to people if it's profitable to do so. This may seem obvious, but we often forget discussing topics in this way. If you try to convince someone that capitalism should be abolished without a structure to the discussion premise for premise, convincing them is going to be impossible, because there's no way you're going to be able to get through all the necessary premises that will make it clear to your target that they're being logically inconsistent. That is not the most powerful side of the commitment principle, though. The more powerful aspect of it, by far, is that we tend to justify our actions after we have done them. This is powerful to us. If we can make someone do something that implicitly supports our position, they will have to justify this for themselves afterward. And the need to be consistent in their actions will significantly increase the likelihoods that they will conclude with our position. A way to do this can be to bring your friend with you on a sticker walk. Don't make a big deal out of it, just say you're going for a walk and put up stickers while you're outside. If you can get them to put up a sticker or two as well, they will have to justify this for themselves as well when they get home. Why this is so effective? Well, you can't put up socialist stickers and dislike socialism at the same time. Your friend has to justify this now, and they'll probably conclude that they think your ideas are at the very least tolerable, which is a really good start. We can build from there. Keep arguing with your friend, and of course employ the other principles too. Principle number 2, reciprocation. If you do someone a favor, they automatically feel a need to reciprocate your favor. However, if you're being a little sneaky here, we can make people return a larger favor than the one we did to them. This can be an effective way to push people to actually have a conversation with you or show up at an event. You want to make your friend join you for the sticker walk we were talking about? Well, give them a few stickers first. Now they will feel a tiny bit more pressured to join you. This is why political parties give people candy and similar things during electoral campaigns. It increases the likelihood that people will listen to their arguments because they feel forced to reciprocate the favor of giving a tiny bit of candy. Use this in a wise, non-obvious way and it may help you. It certainly has helped me before, especially when I try to make people show up at meetings. Principle number 3, social proof. People have a tendency to want to agree with the positions that the people around them have because it makes them feel like they're not being a weirdo. I can't relate! This principle can be used by thinking about the way you frame your arguments, what premises you begin the discussion with, and in what context you bring up the discussion. Let us take an example of each of these. Frame your arguments in such a way that they don't seem like fringe communist-only positions. This is not always easy, but when it is possible, you should be doing it. For example, I find it relatively easy to frame gender as a social construct as a concept that most people at least implicitly agree with. You can do that by appealing to the way somewhat progressive people think about gender roles. The only difference between you and them is of course that gender abolitionists take this to its logical conclusion. If you can frame your positions in a way that make them look more mainstream than they actually are, it is an effective way to increase the likelihoods that they will take your arguments seriously. This might, by the way, be part of why labeling us as extremists is so effective. This way, reactionaries make us seem fringe, weird, and of course dangerous, and social proof makes it obvious that our arguments shouldn't be taken seriously. But a far more effective way of using this principle is to be mindful of what situations you put people in when they're exposed to your arguments. If you put your friend in a situation where everyone but your friend are anti-capitalists, it is much easier to buy many anti-capitalist arguments because of the social pressure that's inherent in that kind of setting. This doesn't mean we should actively pressure them by being mean or anything like that. That would mostly cause harm, but if they are put in a context like that, they can't dismiss the arguments as easily. A proof of how effective this is cancel culture. I mean, cancel culture sucks, but just think about all the content creators that people are labeling as reactionary scum because of a joke taken out of context, presented in a context where social proof is strong. Another example is how in television series, canned laughter is actually a very effective way to increase how much people enjoy a comedy show. If the other people, even though they are, not actually laughing, are laughing, it must be funny, right? Principle number 4, liking. I won't spend a lot of time here because it's quite obvious, even though we often forget it. That's why we have to mention it. People are more likely to engage with arguments made by people they like, so we have to be likable. This means understand where people are coming from and don't become angry. even if they're fucking idiots. This is, of course, much harder in practice than it is to talk about it, and to be honest, the left isn't doing very well in this regard. That's why the angry SJW stereotype exists. If the goal is to convince the person you're talking to, you cannot become angry when people say incredibly mean, stupid shit, even statements that would require a content warning for me to use them as examples here. Remember, this is even more important in one-to-one conversations than in debates. We're not convincing an audience, we're convincing the person we're talking to, and if we become angry at them, they will just dismiss our arguments because we were angry, right? Principle number 5. Authority. Well, this is just straight up normal ethos that you might have learned about in high school. Not very new, I know, but it's important. If you can seem like you're really smart, read far more books than you actually have, or appeal to other people's authority, science, whatever, it just makes it harder to dismiss your arguments. Principle number 6. Scarcity. If something is scarce, humans want it. That's why we like diamonds. There are a lot of stones that are pretty, but diamonds are scarce. There's actually examples of stores increasing the price of goods as a means to sell more as they appear more scarce. And we can exploit this too. As radical leftists, we can appear as something new, something interesting, and most importantly, something scarce. If you can find a way to present your position as the only way to fix the problems that are serious to your friend, or you can invite them to an event that is a unique possibility to fight against something or learn something, that could be a very powerful tool. Radical leftists are quite rare after all, so we can definitely appeal to this. Now, those were the principles, and we're running out of time, but before you go, let me give you some tips on what kinds of people you can target. Part 2, how to select your targets. Well, some are obvious. Other non-revolutionary leftists, Bernie supporters, etc. You know the drill. But we shouldn't limit ourselves to only them. There are many others that have overlapping beliefs, just in less obvious ways. Something that's necessary to keep in mind though is that you don't necessarily want to work with everyone. People can be unwilling to do enough work to be useful, they can be massive assholes, or they can have political opinions that are idiotic even if they agree with us on the majority of the points. For example, class reductionists. You'll have to find a balance between selecting people that seem open to our ideas and people that are worth working with. So, what people do I think you should be looking for? Vegans. When you go vegan, you implicitly accept a few anti-capitalist arguments. There's no point in reforming the animal industry system, it has to be abolished, and political reform is not the best way to achieve that. It's direct action. Yes, it is consumer activism, but even consumer activism is a form of direct action. It's boycott, and boycott is definitely a very passive way of direct action. So it really is. As a vegan, you also accept that the profit motive is going to cause beings harm by default. There's a reason so many anti-capitalists are vegans. It's because there's a lot of overlap in the way we think. Vegans are awesome, recruit them, unless they're really reactionary and a lost cause in other respects. These arguments are, by the way, true for other forms of consumer activism as well, like minimalism, blah blah blah. I've talked about that so much, I'm never stopping, I guess. Democratic socialists. Yep. Hippies. Yeah, they are already developing an alternative view of society with lots of implicit anti-capitalism in it. They dismiss the weird, superficial, alienated lifestyle we live and favor, living life as happy as possible. These people really only need to identify the cause of the culture they dislike, and then they can be really useful activists. Environmental activists. If you have a friend that really likes Extinction Rebellion or something like that, they are already accepting that the profit motive is destroying everything that it can, if it can make money. So their line of thinking overlaps with ours already in many ways. Many of them also favor direct action, which is even better. Generally open-minded people with good attitudes. Your friend doesn't have to be politically active already. They can simply have an open mind and have some good attitudes that we like. Many of the people that I have convinced on the right way of being a human have been this group. So, with all those things, I wish you good luck! If you like this video, please like the video, click the subscribe button, the bell, all that stuff, and most importantly, go outside and recruit some fucking weirdos.